I always thought love would arrive like a gentle spring breeze, almost without a sound, barely touching the skin and the soul. But the day I met Ethan Vance, I understood that sometimes love breaks in like a lightning bolt, suddenly illuminating every corner of your life. My name is Chloe Thorne, a languages and literature student at Georgia State University in Atlanta. Up until that point, my existence was simple, marked by hours spent in class, part-time work, and endless commutes on the MARTA train. It was just a regular Tuesday, one of those days when exhaustion clings to your body after too many hours of notes and lectures. I boarded the bus with my backpack and a worn fabric tote bag, staring fixedly at the floor, wishing the trip would slide by quickly until my stop. Then I heard a deep, warm voice. "Take my seat." I looked up and there he was, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a gray coat that looked straight out of a European fashion magazine rather than the hustle of downtown Atlanta. His smile was easy, open, so disarming that I could barely murmur a thank you before settling into the seat. The normal thing would have been for him to pull out his phone and forget about me, but he stayed standing close by, holding onto the handrail. I felt his eyes observing me with curiosity. "You don't look like you're from around here," he commented in a light, almost cautious tone. I blinked, surprised, before answering, "I'm a student at GSU." He nodded, as if that explanation fit perfectly. "That explains everything," he said with a half smile, looking at me just enough to make me feel noticed, but without making me uncomfortable. I couldn't help but smile back. He laughed softly, and the sound felt so genuine that something inside me loosened. We talked the whole way about unimportant things, hidden coffee shops in Little Five Points, parks where you could get lost on a Sunday afternoon, the fickle Georgia weather that could be winter in the morning and summer by noon. I rarely opened up to strangers, but with him the words flowed. I felt like he truly listened. When the bus stopped at my exit, I stood up, intending to disappear back into my quiet routine, but his voice reached me. "Wait, can I have your number? I'd really love to see you again." Normally I would have said no. I never gave my number to strangers. But there was something in his gaze, in the way he made me feel like the only person on that crowded bus, that made me respond, "Sure?" writing down my digits with slightly trembling hands. That same evening, my phone vibrated with a text from him, and the following night, I found myself standing in front of a restaurant with gilded lamps and luxury cars at the entrance, a place I never thought I'd set foot in. I paused for a few seconds, smoothing down my simple little black dress, my heart pounding in my chest. Then Ethan appeared, with the same luminous smile he'd worn on the bus, extending his hand as if he had been waiting for me all his life. That night, in front of the restaurant, with its shining lights and valet parking, I felt like I was entering a world where I didn't belong. But when Ethan smiled at me, kissed the back of my hand with a gesture that seemed pulled from another era, and quietly said, "You look incredible," the insecurity vanished for an instant. It was as if, in that place full of bright crystal and gleaming silverware, I was exactly who he had been waiting for. Dinner was a parade of surprises. Ethan ordered a wine whose name I could barely pronounce, and he did it with a naturalness that disconcerted me. He wasn't showing off. He was simply sharing fragments of his life with the same ease with which he breathed. He told me about his childhood in Europe, about his adoptive parents, Julian and Meredith Vance, who split their time between Manhattan and Monaco, traveling to art expos and charity galas. There was no arrogance in his words, only a sincerity that kept me listening with fascination. And when he asked about me, my classes at GSU, my family, my dreams, he did it with an attention that disarmed me. At the end of the dinner, as we walked toward his car, I realized something strange. I wanted to see him again. What started as a coincidence on a bus soon transformed into something that occupied every corner of my days. The following weeks became a succession of small miracles. Ethan would send me good morning texts even before my alarm went off, and good night messages long after I had fallen asleep. He'd show up at the university entrance with a hot coffee on my heaviest mornings. When stress overwhelmed me, he found a way to make me laugh until I forgot my worries. One afternoon, he came to my apartment with a bouquet of flowers. "Just because," he said, as if the reason were as simple as thinking of me. Our dates multiplied. Study sessions in the library lengthened into hours-long chats. Walks downtown Atlanta ended in laughter under the city lights. Weekends at Piedmont Park were improvised adventures, and at night, our phone conversations extended until dawn, when we were no longer sure if we were talking or just listening to each other breathe. There was something about Ethan that made me feel different, as if I really mattered, as if I weren't just another student among thousands. That sensation of being seen and valued began to tear down the walls I had built over the years to protect myself. One evening, on the balcony of his city apartment, with the lights of Atlanta spread out at our feet like an ocean of stars, Ethan took my hand and said casually, "I want you to meet my parents. They'll be happy to know I finally found someone special." I fell silent, surprised by how fast everything was moving, though a part of me was thrilled. Meeting the family was a game changer. "Are you sure? We've only been together a short time." He cut me off with a confident smile. "Trust me, Chloe, you're different." And in that instant, I understood how much I needed to hear those words. I felt like the story was just beginning and that my life would never be the same. To understand why Ethan burst into my life like a miracle, I have to go back and talk about my roots. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Atlanta, where the streets were always full of life and the neighbors knew more about you than you wanted. My world was small, but honest, marked by the daily struggle of my mother, Donna Thorne, a woman who knew how to stretch every dollar like magic. My father had left us when I was just a little girl. There were no calls, no letters, no apologies, just an empty space at the dinner table and a heavy silence in the air. My mother never spoke a word of resentment against him, but I could see her gaze harden whenever someone mentioned his name. Donna worked long hours at the Kroger down the street, whether at the checkout or stocking shelves, anything to make sure we never went without food at home. Her strength was silent but unbreakable. My older sister, Brianna, was my role model. 3 years older than me, she radiated confidence and grace. From a young age, she stood out as a dancer, and every one of her performances was a show that left everyone speechless. She had won competitions, received invitations to perform on various stages, and dreamed of moving to New York City to pursue a professional career. When I watched her dance, it was like witnessing someone fly without wings. But an accident changed everything. One rainy night, a driver lost control, and the impact took not only the full mobility of Brianna's leg, but also her future in dance. The doctors managed to save the limb, but the pain was constant and the movement never returned to normal. She tried to move forward, clinging to her passion, but eventually she had to accept defeat. And as if life hadn't taken enough from her, her fiancé dumped her soon after. He did it with sweet words. "It's not you, it's me. I can't handle this." But the truth was cruel. He didn't want a life next to someone who couldn't dance anymore. I watched my sister fade away slowly. She stopped going out, stopped smiling, stopped looking toward the future that she once seemed to hold in the palm of her hand. She shut herself in her room with her headphones on, isolating herself from the world as if it had nothing left to offer her. That wound marked her, but it marked me too. I learned to fear love, to see it as a double-edged sword capable of building up or destroying in a matter of seconds. That's why when Ethan appeared with his easy smile and warm voice, I had been building invisible walls around my heart for years. But even the highest walls can be torn down. One afternoon, while I was helping my mother in the kitchen, Donna observed me in silence before setting aside her wooden spoon. "You're smiling more lately," she said, her tone half accusing, half amused. I couldn't help but laugh and nod. "Yeah, Mom, there's someone." She held my gaze seriously, as if weighing her words. Finally, she sighed and pronounced calmly, "Guard your heart, Chloe. It's worth far more than you imagine." The idea stayed with me all week. I told my roommate, who frowned instead of getting excited. "Listen to me," she said, in a conspiratorial tone. "If they speak French, pretend you don't understand." I laughed, thinking she was exaggerating. I barely knew the basics of the language, just enough to pass an elective class. But she insisted, "People say things when they think you can't understand them. Don't reveal anything. Just smile and nod." The following Saturday, Ethan picked me up in his car. The road wound through tree-lined streets until we reached a more exclusive area, where the city seemed to transform into another world. The Vance mansion looked like it was pulled straight from an issue of Architectural Digest. Modern, sleek lines, large windows bathed in warm light, minimalist sculptures in the garden. My heart hammered loudly, mixing nerves and curiosity. Meredith Vance greeted us at the door, tall, slender, with silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun and a dress that exuded effortless elegance. She greeted me with a peck on each cheek, smiling cordially, though I sensed something more in her eyes, a glint of interest that I couldn't quite decipher. Julian appeared behind her, a serious-looking man in a flawless suit with a scrutinizing gaze that made me immediately straighten my posture. The dining room table looked like something out of a painting. Silver flatware gleaming under candlelight, crystal glasses perfectly aligned, plates delicately arranged. We sat down, and for a moment everything flowed like a movie. Polite questions about my studies, courteous comments about Atlanta, Ethan naturally holding my hand, as if to remind me that I belonged there. However, beneath that perfection, there was something strange, as if every gesture was rehearsed, as if the warmth was only a polished surface. I limited myself to answering politely, carefully choosing every word, while my smile remained fixed. Yet my thoughts kept returning to my roommate's warning. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, until, halfway through dessert, Meredith slightly tilted her head toward her husband and spoke a few words in French. In that instant, the atmosphere shifted, as if an invisible veil had dropped over the table. Meredith's soft murmur mixed with the clinking of glasses. She spoke in French, perhaps believing I wouldn't understand, but I instantly recalled my roommate's warning, and the little French I'd learned in college was enough for the words to pierce me like a knife. Elle ne sait pas pourquoi on a besoin d'elle, n'est-ce pas? She doesn't know why we need her, does she? I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart pounded in my chest as if it wanted to escape, but I managed to keep my expression serene, my smile intact, pretending not to have understood a single syllable. I swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the table as I tried to keep my hands from shaking. Ethan replied in the same language, his voice low but clear. Non, elle ne sait rien. No, she doesn't know anything. It was as if the floor had opened up beneath me. My breath grew short, and I had to concentrate on the movement of my spoon to avoid betraying my shock. Meredith gracefully raised her glass and returned to English with the same impeccable smile as before, complimenting my dress and asking sweetly about my GSU classes. Everything continued as if nothing had happened. Julian nodded a couple of times, courteous, almost distant. Ethan, seated next to me, gently squeezed my hand as if trying to transmit reassurance, never suspecting that the gesture had become a cruel reminder of what I had just heard. I answered with brief phrases, my voice barely steady, while a storm of doubts raged inside me. Why did they need me? What did that hidden conversation, exchanged between wine glasses and measured smiles, mean? The dinner proceeded in a blurry whirlwind. The taste of the dessert, the flowers arranged in the center of the table, the warm lights. Everything became a distant backdrop, as if I were trapped in a play where I was the only one who didn't know the script. Finally, after the polite goodbyes and Meredith's smile, which felt more unsettling than kind, we left the mansion. The cool night air hit me head-on, and I felt like I could finally breathe. Ethan opened the car door and looked at me tenderly. "What did you think of them?" he asked, starting the engine. "They're very sophisticated," I replied cautiously, choosing each word as if walking on broken glass. He gave a soft laugh. "Yeah, they can seem intimidating, but don't take it personally. They've lived in a very different world for too long." I nodded silently, watching the passing lights outside the window. I feigned serenity, but inside, The phrase kept repeating over and over like an echo impossible to silence. She doesn't know why we need her. That night, as I lay down, I knew a seed of fear had been planted within me. I didn't know when it would germinate or what kind of darkness would grow from it, but it was too late. It had already begun to take root. 2 weeks after that dinner with the Vances, while I still couldn't erase the French phrase from my mind, Ethan appeared at my apartment with a calm smile and an unexpected proposal. "We're escaping this weekend," he said, leaning casually against my kitchen counter. "I reserved a cabin on Lake Oconee, just you and me. We need a break." Outwardly, it sounded perfect. Fresh air, silence, a space to get away from the city bustle and the shadows that still lingered from that dinner. But inside me, there was a small hesitation, a flicker that he detected. Ethan approached, cupped my face in his hands, and looked at me tenderly. "You've been tense lately, Chloe. Let me take care of you. I promise it will do you good." I nodded, trying to convince myself that maybe he was right. Maybe I was just imagining things. The drive was beautiful. The highway opened up through green hills and wildflowers dancing in the wind. Ethan drove, relaxed, humming a soft tune while I gazed at the horizon. For moments, the fear dissipated, and I could believe that everything was as simple as he said. The cabin looked straight out of a tourism catalog, built of wood and stone, with a porch that wrapped around the structure and windows that reflected the sunset over the lake. From the entrance, you could see the water shining with golden tones, and the cool air smelled of pine and damp earth. Ethan wrapped an arm around me and said enthusiastically, "See, it's perfect for us." Inside, everything was ready. Soft rugs, a fireplace ready to light, the kitchen stocked with provisions. Ethan uncorked a bottle of red wine and filled 2 glasses, toasting with a charming smile. "To us," he murmured, and his eyes seemed to glow in the warm light. We cooked together, laughed, and for a moment I thought my doubts had evaporated. But I noticed that every time my glass was half empty, he refilled it without asking. I drank, distracted, trusting, until the heat in my head turned to dizziness. "Ethan, I'm so tired," I said, my voice thick, the words slurring across my lips. He was instantly by my side, helping me lie down on the sofa with an unsettling gentleness. "Sleep, darling, just rest," he whispered in a strange tone, too calm, too cold. The darkness enveloped me before I could resist. I woke up with a pounding pain in my temples and a freezing cold crawling up my back. The surface beneath me wasn't the soft sofa from the living room, but a damp concrete floor. I tried to move, but my hands were tied behind me, the tight ropes burning my skin. The air smelled of dampness and rusted metal. A solitary light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a cruel, yellowish glare over the bare walls. Panic hit me with such force that I could barely breathe. "Ethan!" I called out in a thin voice, my throat dry. Then I saw him, slowly descending the stairs. His face was serene, almost tender, but in his eyes glowed something that chilled my blood. "Chloe, you don't understand now, but you will," he said, kneeling in front of me. With a disconcerting softness, he brushed a lock of hair from my face. "This is going to change your life. Soon you'll thank me for it." The words cut through me like knives. I looked at him in desperation, trying to comprehend how the man who had filled my days with flowers and laughter was the same one who now looked at me as if I were a piece in a dark plan. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would break inside my chest. The initial fear transformed into something more, a desperate need to survive. I didn't know what Ethan wanted, or why he spoke of a future I couldn't imagine, but I knew one thing: if I didn't find a way to escape, I would never go home. Time in that basement seemed frozen. My breathing was a rapid echo against the bare walls, and every second with my hands bound increased the burning in my wrists. I moved the ropes over and over until I felt the skin chafe under the pressure. Desperation forced me to scan every corner, looking for anything that might help. That's when I saw it. a rusted nail jutting out from the wood next to the back door. I dragged myself across the concrete on my knees, stifling a whimper every time the rope dug deeper into my skin. I placed my bound hands against the nail and began to rub. Awkwardly at first, then harder, ignoring the pain. Nothing gave way. Sweat ran down my forehead, tears mixing with the fear. I kept insisting, clenching my teeth, until I heard the most anticipated sound, a strand of rope tearing. Another effort, another scrape, and finally, my hand was free. With trembling fingers, I loosened the other hand and then my ankles. Blood slowly began to circulate again, pulsing with sharp pain. My heart was beating so loudly I thought Ethan could hear it from upstairs. I looked up at the stairs, illuminated by the hanging bulb, and knew climbing them would be suicide. The only way out was the small window near the ceiling. With effort, I pushed it until it creaked open. The cold night air hit my face, bringing a flicker of life back to me. I squeezed through the opening, scraping my arms against the rough frame, and fell face down onto the damp earth. I didn't think. I just ran. Branches whipped my face and arms. My feet tripped over invisible roots, but nothing stopped me. My breathing roared in my ears, and behind me, Ethan's voice cut through the silence of the night. "Chloe, stop! It's not what you think!" His words chased me like knives, but instead of slowing me down, they propelled me forward. The woods seemed endless, every shadow a threat, every crunch of branches the echo of his approaching steps. Panic pushed me forward until suddenly I saw a flicker of light between the trees. A cabin! I hurled myself toward it with my last reserves of strength, stumbling over a root and falling to the ground. The pain in my knees tore a scream from me, but I got up, staggering, and kept going until I reached the door. I hammered with my fists, hysterical. "Help, please, somebody help me!" The door was abruptly pulled open, and a tall, sturdy man appeared in the doorway, accompanied by a fierce-looking dog. The animal growled, muscles tense, ready to attack. "What's going on here?" the man asked in a deep, alert voice. My boyfriend. He drugged me, tied me up. He's right behind me," I managed to say between sobs. Tears streamed down my face, fear overflowing with every word. The man didn't hesitate. "Duke, watch!" The dog darted into the darkness, barking furiously. In the distance, I heard a muffled curse, then receding footsteps. The man held me firmly and pulled me into the cabin, locking the door. "I'm Marcus Sterling. You're safe here." He guided me to a worn leather chair. My whole body was trembling, unable to control the shock. Marcus pulled out his phone and quickly dialed, notifying the county sheriff's department. His voice was firm, methodical, like someone who had been in extreme situations before. When he hung up, he covered me with a blanket. "Breathe, Chloe. The worst is over now." I wanted to believe him, but adrenaline still coursed through my veins like fire. Outside, the dog continued to stand guard, and I, huddled in that unfamiliar cabin, could barely assimilate that I had escaped a nightmare. Minutes later, distant sirens broke the night silence. I knew I would soon be surrounded by authorities and perhaps safety, but inside, Meredith's phrase still vibrated like poison. "She doesn't know why we need her." That night, although the sheriff wrapped me in a blanket and assured me I was under protection, I understood that the calm was only a fragile illusion, a pause between the terror I'd lived and the weight of a truth I didn't yet know. The police precinct was lit by fluorescent lights that seemed far too cold. They wrapped me in another blanket and offered me hot water, but my hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the cup. An officer with a kind face asked me to take a deep breath and said, "Detective Patel will want to hear everything from the beginning." Minutes later, a woman with a sharp gaze entered the room. She carried a notebook under her arm and a pen between her fingers. "I'm Detective Patel," she introduced herself, her voice quiet but penetrating. "Chloe, I know this has been a difficult night, but I need you to tell me everything you remember." I swallowed and began to speak, starting from that chance encounter on the bus, the first dates, the details that made me trust Ethan, all the way to the dinner at the Vance mansion, including the phrase in French that I had pretended not to understand. I repeated every word, even Ethan's response. No, she doesn't know anything. When I finished, I felt completely drained. The detective remained silent for a few seconds, then closed her notebook with a snap. That corroborates information we've been gathering, she murmured. I leaned forward, confused. Information? What are you talking about? Patel looked me directly in the eyes. The Vance family has been under investigation for months. We suspect they are part of an international fraud network. They pose as humanitarian consultants, offering millionaires the location of missing family members, children, heirs, lost persons. They charged fortunes, but in most cases, they delivered carefully selected imposters. The air caught in my lungs. Imposters, like me. She nodded seriously. Your resemblance to the missing daughter of Warren Ashford, an international tech magnate, is astonishing. He's desperate to get her back and willing to pay anything. Ethan gained your trust, made sure you were emotionally attached to him, and then they planned to present you as Ashford's long-lost daughter. With falsified documents, no one would have doubted it. A cold chill ran to my bones. So, he never loved me. The words came out choked, barely a whisper. The truth is cruel, Chloe, Patel replied. But Ethan turned you into a target. To him, you were a piece in a multi-million-dollar business deal. My stomach churned. The image of the man who had made me laugh with flowers at my university gate mixed with the one who had tied me up in a dark basement. Hours later, the official reports arrived. Julian and Meredith Vance had been detained at a private airport just before boarding a flight to Monaco. In their luggage, agents found false documents, suspicious bank transfers, and even photographs of me with another name. Ethan, for his part, was located hiding in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Atlanta. When they arrested him, he was calm, almost resigned. The agents also found a briefcase in the Lake Oconee cabin. Inside were ropes, sedatives, and most disturbingly, a passport with my photo, but another name engraved in gold letters. I held it in my hands and felt my skin crawling. That was the life they had planned for me. To disappear as Chloe and become someone else, a ghost created to deceive a desperate man. While all this was being revealed, I felt torn in two. On one side was justice. The culprits had been caught, their plans destroyed. But on the other was the invisible wound, the certainty that I had given my trust and emotions to a man who saw me as merchandise. When Detective Patel assured me that I was safe now, that Ethan and his parents would face serious felony charges, I could barely nod, because although justice had arrived, another battle was beginning inside me, learning to live with what had happened, with the betrayal that had cut deeper than any physical injury. The days following the arrest of Ethan and the Vances blurred into a fog of confusion. Although everyone kept telling me I was safe, my body didn't believe it. Every night, I woke up drenched in sweat, convinced I was still in that basement, with my hands tied and the light bulb flickering above my head. The creak of a door or the snap of a window was enough to send my heart racing as if he were there, waiting for me. Nightmares weren't the only torment. During the day, any small detail brought the horror rushing back. The smell of wine made my stomach turn. Seeing a gray coat on the street made me spin around in panic. It was as if Ethan were still present in every corner of my life. My mother, Donna, did the only thing she knew how to do to help: cook. The refrigerator was always full of stews, soups, and desserts that I could barely taste. She looked at me with her tired eyes, without enough words to heal what they had done to me, but pouring every ounce of love into every dish. One afternoon, as she served a bowl of steaming broth, she took my hand. My girl, I can't erase what you went through, but I want you to know that you will always have a safe place here. Even if you're scared, even if it hurts, I'm with you. Her words made me cry like a child, because I understood that even though the world had become dangerous, my mother was still my refuge. Brianna, on the other hand, approached from a different angle. One day, she sat on the edge of my bed, her face serious. Chloe, I know you feel broken. I felt it too. After the accident, when I lost dancing, and when that man left me, I thought my life was over. They weren't visible injuries, but they were killing me inside. What they did to you is different, but I understand the pain." She looked at me, holding back tears. "Maybe neither of us can erase what we've lived through, but we can learn not to carry the guilt that doesn't belong to us." Her words resonated deep within me. For the first time, I didn't feel so alone in the darkness. My sister and I were connected by invisible scars, different yet sharing the same weight. And then there was Marcus Sterling. At first, he only came by to ask how I was doing, but over time, he became a constant presence. He didn't talk too much. He simply sat on the porch with me while his dog, Duke, lay at our feet, watchful like a silent guardian. That calm gave me more peace than any words. With Marcus, I didn't need to pretend I was okay. I could just exist. As the days passed, he began to tell me fragments of his own story. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, he confessed, "I lost my wife and daughter years ago in an accident. I left the military because I couldn't function anymore. I moved out here, away from everything, because I couldn't stand people looking at me with pity." He paused for a few seconds before adding, "I know what it's like to live with an emptiness that no one else understands. That's why I'm not going to let you go through this alone." I looked into his eyes and felt an unexpected connection. We had both been torn from the lives we thought were safe. We both knew the fragility of existence, and yet we were there, sharing the same air, the same silence, as if our scars could recognize each other. It wasn't an immediate or perfect healing. I still woke up in the middle of the night. I still trembled remembering Ethan's voice. But little by little, those moments with my mother, my sister, and Marcus became small steps forward. For the first time since everything happened, I began to believe that maybe, with support and time, I could learn to breathe without fear, that scars weren't chains, but marks of survival, and that I wasn't alone on the path to shared healing. Time passed in a blur of interviews with investigators and sleepless nights spent trying to reclaim my sleep. But there was one day when everything changed. Detective Patel called to give me unexpected news. Thanks to clues found in the Vances' documents, they had located Warren Ashford's real daughter. When I learned that the magnate, desperate for years, was finally embracing his real daughter, I felt a lump in my throat. I was moved to know that despite the deception, a family was being rebuilt with the truth. And what I never imagined was that this reunion would also reach me. Warren, grateful that I had cooperated with my testimony, fully financed Brianna's definitive surgery. The day my sister went into the operating room, I stayed with her until the last minute. I watched her smile with a mix of fear and hope that broke my heart. Weeks later, when doctors confirmed she would be able to dance again, I hugged her with tears in my eyes. Brianna cried too, repeating over and over, "I've been reborn, Chloe, thanks to you." I knew it wasn't just thanks to me, but to the unexpected turn life had given us. Meanwhile, my bond with Marcus grew deeper. There were no rushed declarations or empty promises. It was a slow growth, like water polishing stone. We shared walks in the woods, silences under the starry sky, and honest conversations where there were no masks. I told him my fears, and he listened without judgment. He revealed his pain over the family he had lost, and I accompanied him in that emptiness that still hurt him. Duke, his dog, became my inseparable guardian. He was always nearby, as if he knew he had to protect me from any shadow that tried to return. And in that simple companionship, I discovered that I could feel safe again. One spring afternoon, Marcus took me down to the lake near his cabin. The sun was setting over the water, painting it in golden hues. Duke ran happily around us, and I felt light, almost as if all the darkness was behind me. Marcus took my hand, and with a trembling voice confessed, "Chloe, I thought my life was over when I lost my wife and daughter. I convinced myself that I would never feel love again until you arrived, knocking on my door in the middle of the darkest night." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a simple ring, beautiful in its sobriety. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to face it with you. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred my vision. I felt that my heart, wounded so many times, had finally found a safe place to rest. "Yes, Marcus," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Yes." The wedding was intimate, celebrated in the dance studio that Brianna had returned to after years of absence. That afternoon she danced again with soft but firm steps, as if every movement were a declaration of life. Marcus took my hand as we watched my sister spin with tears in our eyes, and I understood that we were witnessing a miracle, not just hers, but ours too. 1 month later, while we were unpacking the last boxes in the small house we had decided to share, I held a positive pregnancy test in my hands. I walked to the porch and looked up at the starry sky over the field. I rubbed my belly and whispered, "We're okay now. We're safe." For the first time in a long time, I felt that what was beginning was truly mine, that no one could snatch it away. Today, I firmly believe that sometimes life breaks you into pieces, not to destroy you, but to make space for something better. I was on the verge of losing everything, and yet here I am, with a new family, sincere love, and hope beating inside me. Because sometimes the most beautiful life blossoms from the darkest ruins. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.